Gummies. How are you doing today? As you can see, I have another guest for you. I have Stephanie Artist. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Oh man, I don't know what to say about myself. My name is Stephanie Artist, you guys. Some people may know me from my venture into poetry. Some people may know me from various fellowships of various churches. I did a lot in the natural hair community, in and out for a long time. I've also been known for my weight loss story and just being really transparent on social media with my walk through life as a young woman, as a young adult, and just, I guess, millennialhood, if you can even call it that. So you probably see me here or there or everywhere, and if you haven't, nice to meet you.
I think, let's see, we met in two different arenas.
Yeah.
My cousin Tawana,
yes,
through the natural hair, through the events, and then Toastmasters.
Yes, Toastmasters, yes, I've done that as well, a lot of speaking.
So then from there, we started following each other on social media. So I saw the weight loss journey and all that good stuff. But the post that I would like to read for my gummies that caught my eye, you posted it a couple of weeks ago, and you were very open and transparent. And I was like, it just spoke to me. I was like, I have to have her on. Right? Yeah. And number one, I would have never known that it was something that you were going through. And number two, dealing with mental illness is something that it's kind of something that I'd like to talk about. I like to have this because I feel like, especially in our community, it's just something that's not necessarily talked about. So I definitely want to use my platform to bring awareness to it because I feel like so many people are suffering in silence.
Yes.
And they're afraid because they feel like they're the only people who are dealing with it. So I wanted to have you on. So I want to read the post real quick because y'all didn't come here to hear me talk. You came here to hear Stephanie tell her story. So
Both of us.
So your post said, I was 8 when I told my parents I was depressed. I was 11 when I contemplated taking my own life. I was 12 when I was holding the knife in my living room at 12 a.m. wanting to end things during the night. I spent my teenage years battling with self-esteem, identity issues, stress, anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts. I had my first breakdown at 21 and was committed. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and anxiety with depression. The next decade would be filled with in and outpatient treatment, medication, therapy, and spiritual counseling. The left photo is during a bipolar episode, while the photo on the right is when I'm stable. Mind you, these photos are just months apart. Mental health and its awareness matters. I'm not ashamed of my journey, and I'm certain that my testimony is one that will touch another. God has kept me through it all. The corridors of the mind will try to convince you that taking your life is easier than living it. The devil will plague your thoughts with negative affirmations and worthless imagery, but that doesn't have to be your truth. If you or a loved one feels that there's no way out, there are options. Whether you pray, find someone you trust, or reach out to your nearest hospital, just be sure to seek help. One person dies every 40 seconds. Let's change this statistic for the better. National Suicide Prevention Line. And I want to read that too, just in case somebody is watching and they need that information. 1-800-273-8255. I'll definitely post that.
That was moving.
That was moving. When I was reading that, I was just like I said, first of all, I was just happy. Not happy, but I appreciated the fact that you were being transparent and open about it because, like I said, most of us, we do have testimonies, but we don't want to put it out there. We're afraid that we're going to be judged or whatever. So I was like, I had to reach out to you, like I said, to see if you wanted to share. Sure. But so what inspired you to do it one day, to just say, you know what, I'm just going to share?
Well, I've been really open on social media, I think, for years now. When I first got on, I think Facebook was really just starting to get its peak, and back then I was almost like a recluse. I was very shy and just private, very private. But over the years, you start realizing, the power that social media has. And someone like myself, I really believe in the power of testimony and the power of sharing. You don't want to learn how to do something from someone who's never done it or tried to do it. And so I just believe in the power of sharing the journey, the ups and the downs, because it makes it all relatable. And then it will help someone else that's either at the start or in the middle or nearing the end get that extra push to keep going. So sharing just comes naturally to me now. There was a period where it wasn't like that. And it's just taken years of growth and stretching in my own life, my own personality, growing as a woman, just really sometimes having to dig to that place of saying it's okay. That post in particular, I had sent the picture to like a group chat of mine with some close friends, and I said, would you look at this? Like, and I remember when I first took the picture, it was on account of I had looked in the mirror and I looked unrecognizable. Like my reflection just looked crazy. And I took the picture because I just needed like something to go back to reference. And I did, and I went back and referenced it, and it, as you saw in the picture, it's almost like not even the same person. But that's what mental health looks like, or those of us who struggle with mental health. That's what it can look like from time to time. So really sharing that took a few months, and I really wanted to get to a place where I can't say better, I don't like to say that word, but just more stable enough to share it and be okay with what came with it. Any questions that came with it, any concerns. And when I got to that place, I felt led, and I knew it was time. And ironically enough, it was right around the time where we were really recognizing suicide prevention. It was literally, I think, the same day. And so the timing just was impeccable. And so I just went with it, and the response has been great. A lot of people have shared with me privately and even just publicly that they were encouraged and that they were getting help, that they were reaching a place of not being ashamed about it. And that's really where my heart is at the end of the day. With everything that I do, is hoping that others will want to better themselves by something that I've maybe shared.
Awesome. What really stuck out to me was the first line. I was 8 when I told my parents I was depressed. At 8 years old, like, how did you know?
Well, I had been struggling with a lot of things throughout my childhood. I've just been a naturally anxious child, which I can speak of now, but back then it was just like the running joke in my house. My parents, they'll tell you to this day, you know, she was just always worried all the time about bills and, you know, is there enough gas in the car? It was just like a running thing. And I had some health struggles early on in my life, and a lot changed for me school-wise, weight-wise, just life-wise. And going through, I want to say second, third, I don't even know, fourth grade, they start teaching about your emotions, and the word depression came up. Had no idea what it meant, but I remember we were studying it at that time, and I came home and I said, this is what I believe I'm going through. And I'm 31 now, so back then it really wasn't something we talked about, especially not in the Black home. And so the response was just very expected, like, girl, you don't have to be depressed about. You don't have to be depressed about. You don't have no bills. You don't have no responsibilities. All you gotta do is go home, go to school, come home. Which, you know, was no indictment on them. They were responding naturally, and they really didn't believe that I had a lot of that going on until later years. And even as a child, they put me through various, you know, programs here and there that came up, but I suffered for years in silence and was never able to put a name or a label to any of it. I cried. I, you know, was bullied. I was teased. I was tormented. I was the ugly duckling. You know, even amongst cousins and things like that, you learn how to take the jokes, or, you know, I just would read my books and do my homework, and I was a bookworm, and so you just put that energy into a lot of other things, and you just try to keep keep going through it.
Yeah, just keep it moving. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, like you said, at that time, it definitely was not something that was embraced. It was like, you just pray about it.
Just pray about
take
it.
you a nap.
Go get something to eat.
Go something to eat.
Yep, go outside and
you'll
play.
Be fine. Yeah, especially at that young age.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, what, when was there a particular situation or conversation that you had that led to your parents to take you seriously or started entering you into those programs?
I a few times here and there, whether just like I was involved like in a camp for obese girls, and I was in a few groups at church for young ladies, and I had shared a few things here and there. So sometimes you could just tell that I maybe just was dealing with a lot, but I was still very private. So some things came through medical intervention. At that time, they were really starting to get into a place where they were interviewing children or questioning kids without their parents in the room.
Okay.
So you maybe start hinting at, oh, have you ever thought about hurting yourself? Oh, have you ever, thought about this? And so back then, it wasn't so much, I wanted to take my life. I just didn't want to live anymore. Like, I didn't see the value in my own life, which sometimes people lump it together, but sometimes it can't be lumped together because you may not want to take your life. You just don't feel like this life is worth it.
Right. And you don't know how to process those emotions. Right. And you feel like the best way is just to not feel, which means not breathing.
Right. Yeah. And so the processing of that is hard. So sometimes teachers might intervene or doctors might have intervened or just said something, but still, what do you do? Do you take your teenager to a psychologist, a psychiatrist? What's wrong with them?
Right.
We're Bible believers, so let's get you to that altar. Let's pray this thing out. And I was very devout, still am, but I was very devout as a child. So a lot of it, I did try to just pray through it and deal with it. A lot of the intervention, though, the main intervention happened more so on my own when I was legal and I was an adult, and it really got to a place where I called. I remember it vividly. I was sitting at work, and I think I was 21. I just turned 21. I believed I had dropped out of college due to some health reasons. I couldn't keep up with the schedule. And I was sitting, and I just felt like the walls were closing, and I felt like I had nothing. I was worth nothing. I just felt dropped by whoever and whatever was going on at the time. And I think I reached out to my sister first. I got into the bathroom, but I just was, I verbally, I think I said to her, I don't know what to do. I'm losing my mind or something like that. And next thing you know, I think I reached out to them, or she might have reached out to them, and they actually came and got me out of my job's bathroom. Like, it was near a back exit, and I think they came in the job looking for me, and I was there, like, sitting on the floor, like, losing it.
Right.
And made a couple calls, and then I was actually had to basically commit myself at that point because I was an adult. But I saw a picture, actually, ironically, a picture, because they make you take a photo when you're committed, and they show you the photo afterwards, and that was terrifying. Looking at myself after finally leaving that program, it was scary. Like, I had really had a mental break, and I'm in there with individuals who have just slit their wrist the night before, or had maybe hurt someone. But I really didn't know what to do with my life or anything of the sort. And I was just lost, and it took some time, but got a little bit better.
Okay. So the episode happened, you committed yourself. So what was your journey after that? So is that when you were diagnosed, when you were committed? Okay.
Yes, when I was committed then, that's when I was actually diagnosed. The journey was rough. I was fully inpatient at that time, and then I transitioned to their outpatient program. But I think 31. I think I've been in outpatient programs probably at least 6 more times, maybe, and that's just tossing a number out there, down through the years where I was affected by trauma, stress, whether it be at work or my personal life, family, church, just being extremely overwhelmed, weight loss, weight gain, just the pressure. I've always built a lot of my victories and self-worth and attached it to success. Like,
Right.
If I'm not successful in my career, it's an issue. If I'm not successful at weight loss, if I'm not successful in church or in my various groups, Toastmasters, or whatever the case is, I've always attached my worth to how good I was at something or how much I could achieve in that space. And so whenever I took a hit or I got sick or whatever the case had been, that's when those negative thoughts would come. Start off small, not always massive, but they gnaw at you enough and it eats away at you. So throughout those years, it was sometimes medication that helped stabilize. Outpatient programs can seem scary at first to some people, but they really help you learn and identify coping skills and coping mechanisms to learn. And it's not always the count backwards from 10.
Right.
Sometimes it's learning what to do. And one of the big words that I always like to use now is decompartmentalize, which is really organizing what's priority and dealing with things one at a time versus the overload. So I'm trying to juggle all the things at once, when really if I just focus on one thing at a time, then I can lessen the stress a little bit. I'm a workaholic, recovering workaholic. So if I'm not working, I don't know what to do. If I'm not busy, I can't deal with idle time. So when I'm idle, that's when I'm thinking about where I'm not and what I don't have and who's not here. And then just learning what that looks like, learning what the signals are and the triggers are.
Yeah.
So sometimes therapy can really help identify those triggers and identify what is it about you or inside of you or outside can really have those impacts. So learning those ebbs and flows is key, and you can't always do that by yourself, especially if you don't know what that process is. So you do need that outside intervention, sometimes medication to help level you out. Sometimes something as simple as sleeping, which I wasn't doing. So I did need an aid to help me sleep because of the racing thoughts. And anybody that's bipolar is familiar with the racing thoughts. And, just not being afraid of that word.
Right.
Bipolar, when you tell people it's, what kind of personality are we talking to today? And so you need sometimes those moments to just sit back and reflect and learn. And so I don't regret the treatments that I've gotten. And I'm not ashamed of therapy and help because I needed it. And sometimes you cannot handle it by yourself. And sometimes a self-help book is not enough. And sometimes prayer is not enough. It helps wonderfully, but God also equips people to help us too.
Yes.
And so all of that matters and is relative in the process.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because that's been a struggle for me as far as balancing the spiritual and the mental issues or whatever. Like I self-diagnosed myself, but I haven't like
we all do, it's okay.
Right? I haven't had like a professional diagnosis with everything, but I know I suffer from anxiety. I go through bouts of depression, and depending on who you talk to, that's what the response you get. Well, girl, just pray or just hear some scriptures, whatever. And I'm like, sometimes I feel like it can be helpful, but it also can be problematic because if you say that to the wrong person at the wrong time when they're, depending on where they are in their mental illness journey, I feel like that can make them even spiral even more.
It can.
Because that adds to the anxiety of what's wrong with me.
Oh, yeah.
Why, I did pray. So now what's wrong? You know what I mean? So How did you deal with that? How did you balance that? Like, is that the type of response that you got from your church family, or how?
Well, I mean, the misconception that you're talking about is right. Like the assumption of, oh, just pray. That's all you need. And for some people, that's true. Some people just do need to pray about it a little more and do need to wait till God, responds about what their next steps are. So I don't want to say don't pray.
Right. That's not what we're saying at all. Go to Jesus.
But
sometimes you need a little extra.
No, you do. But I remember one of my former pastors. I came to him after I got out of the inpatient, and I was telling him what was going on, and he said, "Well, can I tell you something? I'm proud of you." I was looking at him like, and he said, because I went to a Pentecostal church at the time, and he said, the problem with us and our culture is that, we wait until the heart attack or the stroke or the high blood pressure or the ulcers or someone to run their car off the road. We wait till all of that happens to say, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. And he said, so the fact that you were able to stop and look for help and find help, that's a major accomplishment.
Right.
Because some of the highest leaders, and we've seen it in the media, leaders are taking their lives. Leaders that promote healthy mental statuses and promote Christ, they're still not reaching where they need to get to. They're not getting out of that pit.
Right.
Which shows how deep that pit can be. And you become, it becomes easy to live outside of the world of, oh girl, I'm all right. And tackling that. And so, I mean, from him at the time, he gave me a really good support.
Okay.
Family, it took some time. I mean, we're good now with it, but back then, and my father can speak freely about it on his own, but he was very close to the idea. And we would sit in family sessions with everybody around the table, and he would say, responses like, well, I don't see, what her issue is. Like, I don't see why I can deal with it and she can't. Yeah. And it just was a lack of just knowledge. Yeah. And culturally, that's what we were all taught. So again, no indictment on my father.
Right.
I love him. But at the time, he just was very ignorant to my space and very ignorant to what the disease, because bipolar is a disease and disorder. It's legitimate, it's valid, and even despite me practically snapping, he still wasn't able to see. And it's taken years of us talking through some things for even him to understand. So, I mean, it's been hard. And those who are friends with me now that, went through it with me throughout the years, sometimes they're still, girl, you okay? You all right? But they'll tell you now I'm stronger than I've ever been. So sometimes it's, just being open about it and telling, your circle of people, this is what I'm going through and it's okay. I'm not saying you got to go to your boss and tell them that you're in therapy or anything, but your village, your close village should know, so that they can know what your triggers are and you can help them. Oh, I found this out in therapy today, or I discovered this. And those who are close to me, they know I have no problem telling them that I'm having a moment, or I need some space, or I'm having an episode, and they're able to work through it with me. Or sometimes I'll tell them, hey, you're doing a little too much. I'm good. But they know what the other end of the spectrum looks like. So sometimes they're just very cautious. And they say, I think you're taking on too much. Maybe you need to back up. So it's just keeping the dialogue open has helped. But now I think compared to back then, there's just so much more information and so much more of a public outcry than back then, where there wasn't really support or understanding. But Pastor Ellis, back then, he was a help. So just to shout him out, he's been good. And my current leader, he understands, and he'll tell me, you all right?
Right.
You know, and so down through the years, you learn who's with you on that journey.
So with your support system, how have you, through the journey of getting to the place where you are now, have you lost friends, and did you feel guilty about it?
Because of the mental hurdles, I'd say I have, but I don't say it from a place of negative.
Right.
Back then, and I still fight through it. I've when I'm in these moments, I tend to be very withdrawn. I tend to isolate. I can be very hurtful sometimes with my responses and my actions. And so I have reacted to some people in a way that has shut them out. And they maybe got tired of me doing that, or they just became frustrated with the ups and downs. And some people I have, unfortunately, just cut off completely, whether it was just their lack of understanding or my lack of patience in trying to get them to understand.
Right.
So back then it was really just ignorance, probably on both sides, and lack of patience on both sides. So I mean, I have lost people, and some just, like I said, they just get tired of the back and forth. And when you understand it's a disease, which took me years, even after being diagnosed, because you get better, what you think is better. You know, you start having good moments and you're up, and the medication is, you're able to wean yourself off of that, and you're not having any issues, and everything's wonderful. Your life is back on track, and then something happens, and you know, you're backtracking, and you're sitting in therapy again, and you're like, what happened? Well, did you think this never was going to happen again? Or, you know, and so the misconception, even for myself, was accepting, like, no, when you have a disease that there isn't necessarily a cure for, it's always going to be there, even when you can't see it, even when you feel like, and I hate to use the word remission associated with, but sometimes you do have states where everything is leveled, and then whether it's a chemical imbalance or just something that happens, it can change you back very, very quickly. And so that's even where that post came from. Those were months apart, not years apart, where it went from trauma, stress, loss, grief, hurt, anguish, to then it takes some time to get back, you know, to a more stable place. So, yeah, I have lost, but I've gained in the midst of that. And, you know, whoever minds doesn't matter, and whoever matters doesn't mind. They don't mind.
Yeah. Okay. I asked that because I see a lot of chatter about protecting your space, protecting your mental, and sometimes not just friends, but sometimes you do have to cut people off to protect your sanity. So I was wondering, like, you know, when you do that, it's kind of, you know, do I continue in this relationship knowing that it's toxic for the benefit of, well, they're my family member, or she's my friend and we've been friends for X amount of years? Or do you say, you know what, I'm worth it, my mental means more to me than that toxic relationship, so I gotta cut ties and go?
I've done that. I've done that too. And I think that that's a mental health thing, but that's also a life thing. Yeah. That you do have to protect your peace, and you do have to protect your space. And I have had, even recently, I acknowledge people that aren't necessarily good for where I'm at right now. Right. Or I sometimes do have to create that boundary to say, you know, I really can't take that on right now. So if maybe you want to try later, we can. But right now, I'm carrying too much, and setting that line. And then for those that comply is a strong word, but for those who really aren't flexible in that space, then sometimes they do have to go. And you can't put them before you. Right. Self-care is a layered topic, and it's got a lot of layers to it. But at the end of the day, if you're not caring for yourself, you're no good anyone else. And I say that to myself as I'm saying it.
Right.
So at times, if anyone's really creating friction in that space of healing for you, you have to do that even in your faith walk. Mm-hmm. If people are keeping you from being leveled out, if they're not understanding you need time to meditate, time to pray, time to get centered, time to get back on track, then maybe, you know, for this space or this season, they can't walk with you, and that's fine. It hurts, but you have to be concerned about your well-being before anyone else's.
Right, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about picking a therapist. How do you go? And like people use it, counseling, therapy, psychiatrist. So how do you go about picking the right counselor, whatever person for you?
It's hard. Pray about it. No, I'm just pray about it. Yes. But I'll say I've been really blessed to encounter some really awesome specialists. Anytime you go just in search of somebody, it can be, it's a pool, it's overwhelming. And sometimes a lot of it can be based upon which specialist can see you first.
Right.
Especially in Delaware where we live, when you come out of a facility like I was in, they won't really release you until you are into someone else's care.
Okay. They
don't want you out there just trying to figure it out on your own. So you got to at least have an appointment. But sometimes you call these offices and they are months backed up, or they're not accepting new patients. So sometimes it's a default thing. Well, this office was open. This office could see me. So when you're searching, I mean, a lot of people just Google it.
Right.
You may want to try to use an aid. There are a lot of different resources that you can use locally to try to look into ones that, whether you have insurance or not, there are still programs out there. And NAMI is a great resource that you can reach out to. NAMI, NAMI, I think it's NAMI, I believe, NAMI. And you can reach out to them. They have tons of programs that you can look to for care. Sometimes even your primary care professional, if you have one, can direct you through to someone that they've either gone to school with or that they know other patients see. Or if you have a friend that goes to see someone, you might want to say, hey, do you know anybody that's a good... somebody, they might have a friend, they might have someone that goes to their church that they might be able to direct you to. So sometimes stepping out and being vocal, I really need to see somebody. You'd be surprised how many women or just anyone, men in your circle might see someone or know someone or used to talk to someone. So that they can refer you to. That way you feel more comfortable. Some offices may even have a preference or let you pick a preference of man versus woman. Okay. I know when I'm sharing and being open, I usually feel more comfortable with a woman than a man, especially when you're just starting out and you're really sharing parts of yourself that you wouldn't share with anyone else.
Right.
You can vocalize that. You may want someone younger versus older, and some offices cater that, some don't, but you just have to be open and patient. I have been in various practices where one specialist didn't work out for me, so they moved me to another one. That one worked out. Right. I've been a part of some practices where just the whole process did not work out, so I had to find somewhere else. I got settled in one place and beautiful, and the specialist relocated to another state, and so I felt I was messed up. I was really hurt by that. Yeah. But they gave me some other resources, but it took time. And reach out to if you can, your spiritual advisors, spiritual leaders. If you go to a fellowship or a church, ask them what they think. Some may not be as supportive, but some may even consider putting someone on staff to put there, or they may at least say, oh, well, I went to school with this person, or I know a good person, and let me ask around. So you don't have to feel by yourself with that, and take your time. If you need help, definitely put some urgency behind it, but like immediate help. However, be intentional with that process and be patient with yourself in learning what works and what doesn't, because it is a lot of trial and error. So be patient with yourself.
So for counseling, does it work the same way? I had different counselors too, but I was just thinking, can they transfer your records when you move to different counselors?
They should be able to,
that.
especially if it's through insurance. It's just like a primary care, switching primary care to primary care, or when you're going from primary care to a specialist, being like a referral. They should be able to transfer your records. Most people have access, that I've moved to, have access to what happened before. They know where I went, the various facilities, because they have to know what medication I'm taking, what worked, what didn't work, what therapy worked, didn't work. And so in most places, if you've been with them, just like a primary care, they can release your records to you. Sometimes it's a little bit of a cost, but they do also need your medical history.
Right.
Whether it's just high blood pressure, they need to know your family's history, because mental illness does run in my family heavily. And some of that did come up, in that process of saying, it's not just me. I mean, sometimes it is a genetic issue. Sometimes it is inherited from immediate family or down through the line. So all of that matters in the discussion. So, when you're looking for who and where and what the process is, all of that is connected together.
Okay. Your triggers. So how where you are in your journey now, when those triggers come, how do you deal with them?
That is an ever growing process for me. And it's ever changing and ever evolving, because I'm ever changing and I'm ever evolving. So what was a trigger 5 years ago may not necessarily be a trigger now. But stress is a trigger. What those stresses are can vary depending on my mood, time of the month, whatever the case is. But stress is a trigger. Trauma is a trigger. Earlier this year, my friend, we lost her in July, and then my father suffered a double stroke in August, and then I lost another friend in September. Wow. And so strict trigger, stress, trauma, anger, frustration. Yeah. So when it all happened, just when you think you're focusing on one, then another one happens. And so those are outside, triggers that just come in. They're unexpected. Right. You can't predict them, prevent them. Right. They just happen. But sometimes, work can be too much, taking on too many projects. Within friends, trying to be there for everybody. So this one has an event, that one has an event, that one has a shower. Then, you start adding in, you have responsibilities at church, and what do you do about that? And then the car goes down, and, you look up, and it's just, it goes from everything's fine to everything's not fine. Right. And so it can really be anything of the sort. Sometimes it's one frustrated thing, and then the next day is another thing, and by the end of the week, you're still talking about the thing that happened at the top of the week. But it's been so many things. And sometimes you have to get to the root, because you might be mad about what someone said, but really, if you dig deeper, it's, this time of year, I'm always upset, and I always get frustrated because I miss them, and then you took it out on them. So the triggers can really vary, but I always try to say anything that is out of the norm can be a trigger, especially for me, and how much control. I'm a control person, so if I don't have control over it and I can't change the outcome or change what's taking place, I tend to just get anxious, and then frustration can let that depression creep in, and then the mood being unstable with the bipolar, and so it all kind of just comes in and explodes. Wow. It's a lot. Managing it can be a lot. It's an ever growing process.
So when all of that does start to pile on, is that like, okay, I need to call my therapist to have a session, or is it as simple as just start talking to yourself, basically, to say, okay, or whatever your because I know for me, when things start to get overwhelmed, my thing is feeling like I just float in life. I don't feel like I necessarily have a plan. When I hear people always say, "What I've always wanted to do, and this is what I wanted to do in childhood," I start thinking like, I don't think I really have that. So then I start thinking, well, you know, at this age, shouldn't I be doing this? At this age, shouldn't I be making this amount of money?
That's how it happens.
Shouldn't I be this, you know? And then I have to like, when that happens, I have to just stop and just take a deep breath and have to start focusing on the positive stuff about where I am or whatever. But it wasn't always that way. It wasn't always that way. So, yeah.
It's hard. It's hard. You gotta. Because I get it asked a lot how I manage it, and I really don't have an answer, like a clear answer. I mean, God, definitely. Faith, definitely. Prayer and a prayer life, definitely. But it just, it's really its own entity over here, and like, not even entity, it's just like its own series of particles. Like, it just, it's always ever moving, and so I don't try to catch it necessarily or beat it. I just try to work through it.
Okay.
And so every day it's all right. You know, sometimes you got to put that thermometer out and feel what's, you know, the pulse of what's going on, and be able to say, okay, maybe I need to back up. Okay, maybe I need to just get some sleep. Okay, maybe I need to just, and I've said, hey, I can't really talk right now. I'm in a ways. You know, hey, I can't really deal with that. And one of my other friends, you know, hey, I haven't heard from you in 5 days. Like, I know how you get.
Right.
And so it's just navigating as best you can, and taking your time, and just one day at a time. It just, that's all you can do, honestly.
A question that I like to ask everyone is, if someone asked who was Stephanie, what would you want them to say?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. Just one thing. I don't want them to say a lot of things. No. I think if I left today, I would hope that people said I was a light in a dark world. You know, that I tried my best to illuminate dark places and just create change in that way. Like, it's a dark place out here. Every day it's a lot going on, but if you can just shine your little light as best you can, even when it's dim,
right?
Even when it feels like it's going to go out, it was still shining. That's what I hope.
Good.
Take away.
That's good. Is there anything else that you want to share? Final thoughts that you would like to share with the Gummies?
One of the best pieces of advice that I got in therapy, that is a mantra in my house amongst my family, is the only thing that's the end of the world is the end of the world.
Wow.
And it sounds so simple, but it's very profound. I'm a worrier by nature, but if it's not the end of the world, it's not the end of the world. And so you'll get through it, whatever's going on. You can get through it. I just encourage you to not be ashamed if you're feeling things that aren't quite right, or even if you notice someone isn't quite right, and you're just feeling like they're not themselves. Don't be afraid to ask them how they're doing. Check on your strong friends is really popular, but really check on your people, check on yourself. And if you notice that something just isn't off, or something is off, or something isn't right, or you're just not feeling well about yourself or your life or people, you can get help for that. And not everybody's help looks the same, but don't just sit and think that it's only you. Don't just think that you can't make it, because you matter and your life is worth living, no matter what you hear or what you feel that's telling you contrary. You matter and your life is worth living. So whatever you got to do to find your life, find it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I really appreciate you coming and bumping your gums with us. Hopefully there is something that you heard today that will encourage you. I will put this hotline number in the description box, as well as put it at the screen, at the bottom of the screen, because we are serious. If you need some help, prevention, please reach out to this telephone number and get it, because it's a very, very, very serious thing. That's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day on purpose.